President Trump is meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House tonight. Meanwhile, the BRICS summit wrapped up in Brazil today. Joining us now to discuss these latest developments is Bart Marcois. He's a former career diplomat and Energy Department official. Bart, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now, this will be the Prime Minister's third meeting at the White House under Trump 2.0. What are your main expectations of this meeting?
Well, I think obviously they're going to talk about the ceasefire and the terms of the ceasefire and the shape of any peace deal, which is a totally different animal from a ceasefire. And they're going to talk about new potential partners in the Abraham Accords. There are lots of tantalizing rumors coming out of the Middle East about various countries and entities being ready to sign on to the Abraham Accords. That we're hearing that Syria is willing to sign on and that they're willing to give up the Golan Heights to Israel as part of the deal. I heard this morning a report that there is a tribal entity calling themselves the Emirate of Hebron, in the ancient city of Hebron, who say we are not represented by the PLO, by the Palestinian Authority, and we would like to make peace with Israel and join the Abraham Accords as the Emirate of Hebron. There are more countries like that looking to join a permanent peace and normalization. And I think a lot of that is going to be on the table tonight.
A lot of developments for sure. Now, Iran's nuclear program and a lasting ceasefire on the Gaza Strip have been dominating the headlines ahead of this visit. In terms of the ceasefire, though, digging into that a bit, how likely are we to see that announced during this visit?
I'm not sure it's going to be announced. I find some of the conditions that are some of the terms that are being offered absolutely appalling, and I know the Israelis do. I think that President Trump does. I think they're out there because they know that Hamas will still reject it. I'll be surprised if Hamas accepts it, but to say, oh, we will let the UN provide food aid. Well, the UN was providing food aid before, and that meant that they took it from international partners and they gave it to Hamas to distribute. And Hamas used it as a weapon, used food as a weapon to control the population. Now you have a humanitarian fund out there distributing food aid, and Hamas is shooting people that come close to the distribution centers. They also are making the reprehensible term of allowing Hamas to continue to hold hostages, and they're holding dead bodies as hostages. You know, Jewish tradition respects the human body. They consider it, but they call it B'Tselem Elohim, the image of God, and they respect every piece of every human body. There's a group called Zaka that is it means I can't remember the exact meaning. The volunteers for disaster victims, and they go and they literally scour sites of explosions and pick up every last piece of every human body and try to piece it together so that it can be buried. That's how much respect they have for dead human bodies, and Hamas knows that, and they're holding dead bodies as hostages. They're holding at least 20 live hostages. Let them release all of the hostages and then talk about a ceasefire and then talk about peace. And I know that's the Israeli position. I'm sure that President Trump will not approve any kind of peace deal that still holds at least American hostages. And there are still American hostages being held. It's just not going to happen. It shouldn't happen while those hostages are still being held.
I have spoken with people of the Zaka group before. They also help other, natural disaster and war-torn areas like Ukraine, a very
Yes.
incredible group. I want to go back to your earlier point. What would a post-war Gaza look like? Because Netanyahu has said Hamas cannot be allowed to regroup and potentially launch another October 7th, while Hamas's charter says it's in direct conflict with Israel. Is a lasting ceasefire even possible given those stances?
Not given those stances, no. And I don't see the Israelis changing theirs. They have no incentive to. they have Hamas on the run. Hamas itself is saying, look, 80% of our people are gone. Our leadership, our fighters, we can't really mobilize anymore. But Hamas has to completely disband. They have to give up the hostages. They have to give up the remaining leadership. And then they have to change their charter. They have to eliminate the provisions in the charter that call for the death of not just Israelis, but of every Jew in the world. And then after that, all the Christians and all the non-Christian, non-monotheists and they expect that the entire world will submit to their interpretation of Islam. They can't go on like that. They can't continue having United Nations schools teaching children to murder Jews and teaching them to hate Jews and to hate Israelis. Those kind of things have to be changed before there can be a lasting peace.
And Bart, zooming out a bit here, if we do see this lasting ceasefire or perhaps an expansion to the Abraham Accords, what's the likely impact on China, which has been angling to be seen as a mediator in the Middle East?
Great question, Tiffany. All of this, everything that's happened in the last month or two has been one body blow after another to the reputation of China. China has been exposed as an unreliable ally. They stood by and they did nothing to help their so-called ally, Iran, their client, Iran. They have done nothing to help them. They've done nothing to support them. They will do nothing to support them except send clandestine plane loads of equipment and supplies to them. They are increasingly irrelevant in the region because people don't see them as a strong horse. We can't write them off. It's a huge country. It's a powerful country, but they are not relevant in the Middle East right now.
And speaking of China, the BRICS summit just took place in Brazil. That's the bloc made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, both Xi Jinping and Putin were missing this time. Trump actually announcing an extra 10% tariffs on any country aligning themselves with BRICS and their, quote, anti-American policies. How much of an impact or a burden would that be on these nations?
It is a deterrent. It's a signal to them that if they go forward with part of that anti-American policy program that has been suggested by some BRICS members, that they will pay a price for it. Our real vulnerability as America is the level of debt that we have, and if the world turned away from the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency, that would deal us a blow that would be very difficult to recover from. President Trump is aware of that, and he's signaling that if they even look at doing that, he'll slap 10% tariffs on them, 10% extra. And he said before he was inaugurated, he said anybody who really goes forward and tries to carry that out will get the full wrath of the weight of the American economic power. And had Joe Biden still been president, had Kamala Harris been elected president, I would be terrified of this BRICS meeting. But with Donald Trump in office and with the commitment, you see a commitment from Mike Johnson that there will be 2 more reconciliation packages passed, and they will focus on cutting spending. If we truly rein in our spending, we will cover over our Achilles heel, and they will not be able to hurt us. The American economic growth is all that's protecting us from paying the price for our debt. China, again, increasingly irrelevant. When Xi Jinping doesn't even bother to show up, it's a sign that he's weak at home. His grip is failing. His grip is loosening, and he doesn't dare leave home during this time.
Speaking of Xi Jinping, this is the first time he's missed the BRICS summit since he took power in 2013. Do you see his absence having a notable impact on the dynamic among just the BRICS nations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this started as an effort. Really, it was Brazil and India that started this, and it was the triumph of the non-aligned movement that that started back in the 1960s, and it was an attempt to stabilize the world economy amongst non-aligned countries, meaning the previously third world countries, some of which are very, very wealthy now and are increasing in wealth. And the idea was that the southern hemispheric countries should unite and combine their economic power, their population power. China and Russia sort of muscled their way in, and they started calling it BRICS. And China has been kind of in the driver's seat for the last couple of years. And with Xi not even showing up, it's now Narendra Modi's, Prime Minister Modi's show. And I think this is a time for the primacy of India. And India, it's in India's interest to come closer to the United States. It's in Prime Minister Modi's interest, and it accords with his personal and political desire to be closer to President Trump and to America. So I think that the dynamic is shifting with this meeting. It just shifted from China to India as the leader, and I think it's India's ball to carry for a while.
Well, big changes for sure. Bart Marcois, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's always a pleasure.